Nigeria records 587 new cases of COVID-19.
President Buhari addresses China-Africa Summit, calls for collective regional action against COVID-19.
INEC tells political parties to conduct a dual-party primaries in 9 days.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss 5 years of the Buhari administration with focus on works and housing. Now, the United Nations Development Agency, that's UNDP, specifies that there can be no sustainable development without transforming the way we live, build, and manage our urban spaces.
And from the UN perspective, a robust investment in infrastructure, particularly in the housing sector with safe, decent, and affordable housing, is critical.
Now, on assumption of office, President Muhammadu Buhari, apart from the three cardinal programs of his administration, took, as it were, a major leap into the work sector with the launch of the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund under the management of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority.
Indeed, the $650 million PIDF began three critical road projects, including the second Niger Bridge, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, and the Kaduna-Zaria and the Kaduna-Kano Expressway. In addition, proceeds of the second Sovereign Sukuk funds were also deployed to finance 25 road projects across the country, shoring up the over 500 ongoing road construction across the country.
Well, there's no doubt about it, Kirian, that housing ranks high on the priority list of human beings. But the sector, that's to say the housing sector, accounts for only about 3.1% of the rebased gross domestic product, and total current housing production is put at some 100,000 units per year for a country of nearly 200 million people.
But nonetheless, housing appears to be a luxury in Nigeria, as indicators reveal that the over 20 million housing deficit will require a minimum of additional 2 million housing units per annum for 10 years to bridge the gap in housing needs of Nigerians. Currently, it's not going to be easy, from all indications. The gap is quite huge.
That's right, no question about that. But Kyria, there are often times when we talk about the housing deficit in the country. The question that arises is, fine, who did the survey to ascertain that at some point we're talking about 17 million housing units that we needed to provide for our population? Now it's climbing up to 20 million. There's no doubt about that on account of the growth in the population and the demand, for affordable housing, certainly there is a gap to be filled. Now, President,
we don't even have a clear picture of what the population is at the moment. We are all saying 200 million, some people say 180 million, but I can assure you that, look, when census is conducted, we may be over 200 million.
Well, the last census exercise we had was in 2006, and this is 2020, that's 14 years ago. Well, with the Buhari administration coming on board and seeking to close the gaps in the housing sector, we find that there was a desire to create or provide at least 2 million homes in the first year. Now, from all indications, it would appear that there are still gaps in covering those critical aspects in the housing sector. Certainly, nobody expects the federal government alone to be the provider of housing accommodation.
All right, it's 5 years of steering the ship of change and 3 more years to go. What has been the high points of works and housing in this administration? How can the ministry close up on the housing deficit and the critical infrastructure across the country? I am Kirian Umayo. Thanks for joining us on the show today, where we will be focusing on works and housing under the Buhari administration.
Yes, Kieran, as you very well know, the housing, works sector oftentimes will get a sizable slice of the federal government budget annually. And the question, of course, will be, okay, what are the results from the budgetary allocation and releases? Because oftentimes you have a mismatch between allocation and then actual releases. What is the status in terms of houses or units being delivered by the federal government? What is the collaboration with the subnational entities? My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I join my colleague Kieran Mayo to also welcome you to this edition of the program. It's a wet morning here in Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. In the course of the program, we have our user complimentary segments, and these include business, news, and newspaper review. In the meantime, let's join Musbao Danwahab for the highlights of the early morning news. Good morning, Musbao.
Good morning, Kingsley. Let's take the news. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, has reported 587 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 in the country. This new figure raises the number of confirmed cases to 17,735 in Nigeria. In the breakdown, Lagos again has the highest number of the day with 155 cases. Edo comes second with 75, FCT 67, Rivers 65, Oyo 56, Delta 50, Bayelsa 25, Plateau and Kaduna 18 each, Enugu 17, while Borno and Ogun State have 12 each. Ondo recorded 7 new cases, Kwara 4, Kano and Gombe have 2 cases each, while Sokoto and Kebbi recorded 1 case each. Lagos remains top on the Nigeria COVID-19 chart with 7,616. Next is the FCT with 1,391, followed by Kano State with 1,160. About 469 people are reported to have died from COVID-19 complications so far, while 5,967 patients are being discharged after recovery, leaving the country with 11,299 active cases. Nigeria says it will not only support but actively participate in any collective action at both regional and global levels towards tackling the coronavirus pandemic and its fallout. President Muhammadu Buhari stated this while addressing participants at an extraordinary China-Africa summit on solidarity against COVID-19.
The fight against a global pandemic that continues to take so many lives, threaten livelihoods, and challenging the very fabric of societies requires enhanced cooperation and worldwide solidarity.
On security, the National Security Advisor, Babagana Munguno, has condemned the killings of innocent citizens in Katsina State and the Northwest Zone. The National Security Advisor, who was addressing newsmen after the closed-door meeting between the service chiefs and Governor Aminu Masari, said there is the need for collective effort of local communities to address the ugly situation for good.
We emphasized on human security being the centerpiece of the National Security Strategy of 2019. And we're going to look into these areas that are specified in the National Security Strategy.
On electoral matters, INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu says the 27th of June 2020 deadline for the conduct of party primaries and the 6 p.m. Monday 29th June 2020 deadline for the submission of candidates and their credentials for the Edo governorship elections remains sacrosanct, and there will be no extension. The INEC Chairman, who gave the advice at an interagency consultative meeting on election security this this Wednesday observed that arising from the experience in managing the nomination of candidates for the last two governorship elections in Bayelsa and Kogi State, it is important to draw the attention of political parties to the four mandatory requirements for eligibility of candidates for governorship elections, which are: the candidate must be a Nigerian citizen by birth, must have attained the age of 35, must be a member of and sponsored by a political party, and must be educated up to at least school certificate level or its equivalents. INEC added that adherence to these clear constitutional provisions is compulsory in order to avoid unnecessary litigations, while calling on security personnel to be proactive during electioneering campaigns. The INEC chairman promised that a draft code of conduct for the security personnel on COVID-19 has been developed and will soon be out. The Federal High Court's Abuja has deferred hearing in the fundamental rights enforcement suit instituted by the former governor of Edo State and suspended APC national chairman Adams Oshiomhole against the Edo State government. Is challenging the proceedings of a Judicial Commission of Inquiry which allegedly indicted his administration.
Apparently, he didn't receive any form of invitation, and there was no indication that he was invited. And don't forget, this happened during the COVID-19 regulation.
And that concludes the news highlight for now. More in the course of the day. Join Kingsley and Kieran after this break with the continuation of Good Morning Nigeria.
We now go business. Nigeria's inflation rises to 12.40% in May 2020. Let's now join Kunle Adeye for details.
Latest inflation figures for the month of May 2020 released by the National Bureau of Statistics show that headline inflation rose marginally. Inflation climbed to 12.40% in May from 12.34%. Food inflation rose by 0.01% to 15.04% in May 2020 from 15.03% in April 2020. Core inflation stood at 10.12% in May 2020 from 9.98% in April 2020. Highest food increases were recorded in oil and fats, fish, potatoes, yam and other tubers, vegetables, bread and cereals, and fruits. Month-on-month, urban inflation rose to 1.18% from 1.06% in April, while rural inflation rose to 1.16% from 0.98%. And the Nigerian Stock Exchange for the first time in the week ended positive as equities markets on Wednesday closed on a positive note as Nigeria's Stock Exchange or share index appreciated by plus 0.17% to close at 24,930.88 points as against minus 0.09 depreciation recorded previously. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeye.
Thanks a lot, Kunle, for the business package. Coming up next now is Newspaper Review.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo TAB, is here this morning, as always. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kirian. Good morning. Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
Right, Bayo, good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's begin our review this morning with the Punch newspaper. And we go above the name flag. It says, fuel consumption and smuggling go up 54 million liters per day. That's according to NNPC. Fuel consumption and smuggling. So we have official figures for smuggling. Details can be found on page 22. Below that, federal government unveils fresh plans on concession of 10 highways. That's also on page 22. Balarabe, kidnap kingpin, Wadume are close friends, and that's according to the ex-DCO, as Divisional Crime Officer. Lead story says Obaseki, Tambuwal, and Secondos meet and perfect defection plan. Details of that story can be found on page 2, along, of course, with the riders. Confusion in APC as 2 acting national chairmen emerge. Party may expel Giadom for declaring self chair to replace Oshomole. Ajumobi sues for peace, says National Executive Council will meet soon. And the photographs on the front page there of the paper from the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport in Abuja. Those photographs were taken yesterday ahead of the planned recommencement of local flights. NSA, that's National Security Advisor and Inspector General, and others in closed-door meeting with Masari, that's Governor of Katsina. Politicians fuel North violence, and the restructuring campaign are selfish. It's attributed to the Anglican primate. Inflation climbed higher in May, hit 12.4%. That's page 21. NNPC continues oil search in Niger, Kwara, and Kogi. Troops kill 2 gunmen in Benue. And Catholics blame Ishaku for Taraba killings. Amnesty knocks federal government as Katsina protest leader is arrested. That's page 8. Kieran.
All right, now let's turn to the Nation newspaper. Both the nameplate to have stories there. JNI seeks action against killings. No more rhetorics. It's on page 8. Ganduje knocks PTF report on strange deaths. It's on page 29. Bauchi slashes budget to 128 billion naira. Adamant doctors kick against intimidation. That's a rider to that. The story is on page 29 and 7, respectively. Now, below the nameplate, APC OK Sajimobi as chair, sacks Giadom from NWC. Muzodim to conduct a dual primary. Obazi steps down. PDP meets today on Obaseki. All right, and we also have other stories. AG, a chair, Ajimobi sues for peace, or Shomole Gaidom's takeover makes no sense. A Ekiti Council chair threatens lawsuit. APC and its leadership tussle and analysis. More on those, you get them on pages 5 and 8. Nigeria loses $48 million to oil theft, says NNPC GMT. That story is on page 27. Of course, the photo story of the Nation is interesting as well as scary. You know, this is another kind of palliative. A girl feeding an elephant at the zoo in Jos. This picture,
that's interesting.
The girl is even being careful about that. You know, she has one of her legs behind. You know, if the elephant misbehaves, she will take to her heels. From all indications. Okay, now Naira falls as federal government plans unified exchange rate. Inflation now 12.4%, says MBS. It's on page 27. Aduke's trial for August 3. Page 7 has that story. Federal government, states, councils share 547.309 billion. It's also on page 27. Let's begin bio now.
Yes, let's start with the story about the little girl and the elephant.
Yes.
I think it is a risky adventure and it should not be encouraged. The zookeepers must be very careful because you never can tell when a wild animal could be in a bad temperament, and it could be very, very risky for an innocent girl. But let's go to the story that Kingsley highlighted. The Federal Ministry of Works is contemplating seeking private sector intervention to the tune of about 163.3 billion to handle 10 national major highways, and that is about 16 billion per highway. And the highways cut across the nation include Benin Asaba, Abuja Lokoja, Kaduna, Kano. Others are Onitsha, Owerri, Aba, Enugu, Port Harcourt, Ilorin, Jeba, Abuja, Kevi, Akwanga, Kano, and Maiduguri, Shagamu, Benin. And the initiative is that the private sector involvement will mitigate the challenge of paucity of funds. However, there are certain constructions that are supposed to be provided on the highway to check and preserve the highway. You know, sometimes when you have excess weight going on the highway, those highways tend to depreciate very rapidly and considerably. So those things have been taken into consideration. The ongoing strike by the National Association of Resident Doctors has claimed a member of the Doctors Association, Dr. Yusuf Olabode Thomas of the Hematology Teaching Hospital Akure, died yesterday. The president of the NARD, Aliyu Sokuba, says that there is nobody to attend to him. We are also, because we are on strike. The resident doctors began their strike last Monday, and they say that even they are not immune to the strike. However, the popular radio presenter in Lagos, Dan Foster, is said to have died of COVID-19. Yeah, age 60. The America-centered presenter came to Nigeria in 2000. He had functioned variously as a radio presenter, a producer, also as DJ. He won awards as the best radio personality and also media personality of the year. Meanwhile, by way of statistics, we have yesterday registered 587 cases in 14 states, bringing our total now to 17,735. The good news is that we had our highest last week, 681. And since that date, that seemed to have been our peak. And we now are on a gradual slide downwards. Naturally, everywhere there had been a reopening of a lockdown, there will always be an immediate spiral of hiking in figures. I think all things being equal, let's pray and hope that we have reached our peak with 681 and will begin to go down. But the emphasis is maintaining the health protocol so that we can continue to keep the COVID-19 at bay.
But it may be too early in the day, to determine whether we have gotten to the peak, because some sectors of the economy are still locked down. We have not started internal flights. We have not started interstate movements. Churches and mosques have not fully resumed, and what have you. It's only when we get to that level that perhaps we'll be able to know whether we're going to have more increase. Because 600, of course, like you said, it seems to be the peak because we're coming down a little bit. And again, considering the extent of a test that's being carried out, Enugu, for instance, where I come from, we used to have 2, 3, 4. Now we have 17 yesterday. We had also 19 the previous day. So you can find out that in some other states, the thing is increasing.
Yes, in fact, the states that were low number are now recording high number. Rivers, for instance, yesterday had 65, Delta 50, Bayelsa 25, and in the weeks past, they used to score numbers like in single digits.
Exactly.
And so there's considerable. But if you look at it the world over, wherever there has been a reopening of lockdown, there is a tendency that there will be the increase. And don't also forget that when we started, we had 3 laboratory tests. Today we have about 30 testing points. Therefore, there has been an increase in the testing.
Yes,
and therefore, the tendency for us to discover more is higher.
Well, I think the ultimate lesson is that to the extent that there's no vaccine yet for this virus, and you have all kinds of candidate drugs that have been proposed or otherwise recommended for treatment of COVID-19, we mustn't let our guard down.
Yes.
I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, yesterday was Wednesday, and some of the markets in the Federal Capital Territory were open. And people just go about, without putting on their face mask, and there's no maintenance of social distancing. It's as if, no, this corona is gone. So people don't wash their hands regularly, don't use hand sanitizer. I think the point has to be made that the corona is still around. And the fact that you are seeing persons who are dying of corona, you just mentioned Dan Foster, who was a very well-known broadcaster, radio broadcaster in the Lagos area and participated in a number of activities and events. I mean, the senator also died in Lagos some days ago. So the fact is that the coronavirus is still around.
Very much around.
And we have to be very careful. So the numbers may have come down this week, but let's see what happens going forward.
There is another one of concern, that is in Plateau. A private clinic has to be shut down because 29 of the health workers had contacted COVID-19. But the good news is that at least they have now sealed up the place. They are in the process of decontaminating the place. Plateau has registered about 198 and 114 discharged and about 5 deaths. And Madagascar is also in the news again. They registered 67 positive cases that were recorded for COVID-19. However, the government says those were false positive. It ordered a retest, and they found that there were only 5 positive tests. And there's indication that sometimes one of the samples, if it has a high level of potency of the virus, has a tendency to infect the other samples.
So the virus jumps from one test tube to another test tube.
As a matter of fact, the medical community globally is in a confused state, if you ask me. Because,
big time.
Just like what happened in Britain, they've got one particular drug, that says a very common drug, you can find everywhere across the globe.
But they didn't know before.
They didn't know before, yeah, exactly. And again, what we had yesterday, that Nigeria has not recommended that drug, But I keep wondering whether there should not be a put when a nation discovers a particular drug, you put it on trial. You can even ask the patient, do you want to be treated with this or that? You know what I mean?
No, that drug in Britain has been put on trial.
Yes, by the Oxford experts.
Experts at Oxford University. It's been put on trial. That's why they came up with the findings as to its efficacy, that it can actually help reduce fatalities in a good number of the cases. Drug is said to be about £5, I believe.
Yes, very cheap,
and treatment
commonly available.
Shouldn't cost more than £35. So, chloroquine was also a candidate drug. Another cancer drug was also proposed in the U.S. So it's a big trial time for not just the scientific community, but indeed for humanity altogether. And there are huge lessons to learn. The Earth has been able to, at least during the lockdown, reheal itself, and then be sure that the baton that it has received from humanity is minimized in terms of impact going forward. The number of factories are shut down, which means that there are job losses and there are huge economic consequences to face going forward.
There's this discontent coming from the All Progressive Congress following the court confirmation of the suspension of the national chairman. The publicity secretary of the party cited that within the context of the constitution of the party, section 1423, the deputy national chairman ought to act as chairman. But when they met yesterday, the deputy national chairman, Senator Ajimobi, was not around. So the deputy national chairman from the South presided, and they confirmed the screening process that was earlier on carried on. But before that they could wind up, the deputy national secretary also wielded a ruling of the Federal High Court Abuja in March, which authorizes him to be chairman of the party, and he has unilaterally cancelled the screening process. Meanwhile, INEC is on record as saying that they have 10 days to complete all primaries and there will be no extension.
Well, but the issue is that why was it an issue in the first place? Who takes over? They have a constitution. So why should a constitution be confusing to people who actually made the constitution? I mean, it's worrisome, But now they've arrived at, if it is true, if somebody does not go to court tomorrow, based on the meeting yesterday, someone could go to court, and stop action, that's what has been happening.
Well, the drama goes on. Yes. We'll keep watching. Baya Toby, thank you very much for being around. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll get ahead with discussing 5 years of the Buhari administration, special focus on works and housing.
Well, we thank you for being there for us on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. Now, so set the mood for our discussion this morning on 5 years of Buhari administration with focus on works and housing. Here is a background report by Abd Malik Adio.
For over 20 years, the clamor for the second Niger Bridge was the subject of politicking, spanning several administrations. May 29, 2015 till date, the Buhari administration is flying on the wings of change, evident with visible works at 48% completion on the second Niger Bridge, a feat adjudged by many as a demonstration of sincerity of purpose by the present administration and an upgrade to advance rapid economic development in the area.
And I thank President Muhammad Buhari for taking that initiative to actually actualize it where it is today.
This is one out of the numerous projects the government is taking under its wings with a clear-cut destination to change the narrative in the work sector. This is similar in the housing sector, as it has also recorded some level of transformation. The deployment of 18 billion naira to refinance mortgage loan portfolios of member lending institutions, enhance liquidity in the Nigerian housing market, thus enabling mortgage lenders to provide more housing loans and encourage long-term mortgage loan creation. In another landmark move to boost housing development in the country, the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, in conjunction with Nigerians' leading unions, commenced the implementation of a national affordable housing delivery program for Nigerian workers. The Office of the Head of Civil Service of the Federation also launched a Federal Integrated Staff Housing Program, FISH, in Abuja and 3 states, namely Cross River, Nasarawa, and Niger, to assist in solving housing challenges of its over 55,000 civil servants subscribed to the program. Also, policies like reduction of equity contribution from 5% to 0% for those seeking mortgage loans of up to 5 million naira and reduction from 15% to 10% for those seeking loans of over 5 million naira was also a game changer that helped ease access to housing. Experts say, though government has done well in consolidating process in strengthening the FMBN and NMRC, more needs to be done based on government deliberate plans, determination, and commitment to provide Nigerians with what are now tagged dividends of democracy. On Good Morning Nigeria, we will assess Ministry of Works and Housing in 5 years under the Buhari administration.
All right, now joining us to kickstart this conversation, let's introduce the Honorable Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. He's joining us via Skype. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning to you and good morning to Nigerians.
Honorable Minister, indeed, Kingsley, maybe I'll give you the first shot, for this conversation. We've had you on several occasions on NTA, on different platforms, where you elucidated the actions being taken by government to ramp up development of infrastructure in the country, with emphasis on roads and housing. Now, we have done 5 years of this administration, and it's a concern this morning to look at what has happened in this very, very important sector in our national life. So give us an overview of what has taken place with respect to roads, bridges, and of course housing development.
Thank you. I think your introductory report is indicative of what is going on, because with limited resources, clearly we have done much more than what we meant compared to the resources that were available to this country before we came. At the moment, we are executing over 600 road projects. We are executing various bridge projects. The second Niger bridge is only one of them. The Loco Oweto is another. The Ecom Bridge is another. In Cross River, the EB Bridge is another, linking Benue and Taraba across the River Benue. And there are a couple of other short and smaller bridge projects across the country. And simultaneously, we are undertaking bridge maintenance. We are also in tertiary institutions building internal road network of federal universities and repairing those that are in need of repair. But I think the infrastructure picture will be incomplete if we limited what we are talking about only to roads and bridges. Infrastructure intervention is really a wholesome economic intervention. And therefore, not only are we connecting states, moving goods, moving people, enabling services to be provided, we are also connecting nations. So if you look at the country today, there's also a bridge we're building linking Nigeria and Cameroon through Abakaliki. And that and other road projects then facilitate international trade under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I recall recently I announced that some countries were asking to buy food from Nigeria, and my attention was brought to the fact that some people expressed perhaps surprise that that is happening. But that has been a regular feature of our economy. If you go to markets like Dawano in Kano, Ilela in Sokoto, and there's another market in Kebbi. In the Kebbi market, people come from as far as Algeria to come and buy produce. They come from as far as Libya and Tunisia to Ilela and Dawano market. So people must not underestimate the size, the capacity, and even the opportunities that are being experienced by this country. There are challenges, no doubt, but they do not make us a small or weak nation by any shred of the imagination. We have challenges. We have to quickly complete our infrastructure in spite of dwindling revenues. But here we are. This is what we're doing.
Into the governing philosophy for the projects being undertaken by the administration with regard to, one, completion of inherited projects, as well as maintenance of pre-existing infrastructure.
Well, I have alluded, for example, to the maintenance of pre-existing infrastructure, like in universities. We undertake maintenance of inherited assets. As I speak to you, there's maintenance work going on several bridges that have been neglected for a while, from Tamburawa Bridge in Kano to Isaac Bridge in Rivers to Eko Bridge and Marine Bridge in Lagos, and many others. We have a 4-year plan for executing these bridges, from the very, very serious cases to the less so serious and to the routine. But you see, the story of our infrastructure will also be incomplete if we do not relate this to what is happening in the economy. Great nations who want to build prosperity commit to infrastructure, not because they just want to build beautiful things, but also because they want to distribute wealth in the society. And so from when you award a road project, you begin to see the impact of prosperity from when building materials are being gathered. Laterite and sand provide revenues to the landowner on whose land you are taking the sand. It provides opportunity for the truck owner, whose trucks then become busy to ferry the sand. It provides opportunities for entrepreneurs who get subcontracts from contractors. So if I may dwell a little on this, the subcontractor takes the contract to sell sand to the contractor at maybe 30,000 naira per 20-ton truck. He pays the landowner 6,000 or 7,000 naira per 20-ton truck. He pays for the truck. He also pays the driver. The profit of that is his. So even in the process of just supplying sand, 4 different people have benefited: the landowner, the truck owner, the truck driver, and the subcontractor. And this happens also with cement, with iron rod, with lubricants. So on the second Niger Bridge, for example, we are going to use 19 million liters of diesel. So if you look at that, Julius Berger doesn't make diesel, so they are going to subcontract that. Now, 19 million liters of diesel times about 224 naira per liter of diesel, that will give you roughly 4-point-something billion naira worth of enterprise. So there are people who are earning a living from that, even while that project is going on. And this is happening in 600 different locations where we are executing contracts. So that is the economy that people must first see. Cement is also being subcontracted and supplied. Surveyors are being employed to do survey, assess compensation payments. Engineers and investigators are being used to test soil, to test material, because you can't just use any material. So all of this is the ecosystem of prosperity that is happening while the construction is going on.
All right, Honorable Minister, I think we'll be also be discussing this program based on the, the two-headed, ministry that you are in charge of, and also talking about housing as well. And you know that housing appears to be the third in the priority list of human needs. And historically speaking, Nigerian governments, the previous administrations didn't do well when it comes to provision of housing. Because if we are providing other infrastructure and the Nigerians do not have where to live, then everything will now come back to zero. And housing appears to be luxurious or a luxury in Nigeria, so to speak. And indicators reveal that over 20 million housing deficit will require a minimum of additional 2 million housing units per annum for 10 years to bridge the gap in housing needs of Nigerians. Tell us about housing since you took office as the Minister of Works and Housing.
Well, I think you've rolled up a couple of things together there in your question, but I heard in the earlier part of your program you were talking about the need for a census, and I couldn't agree more with the compelling need for a census, because that is the basis for then determining some of the numbers that are being thrown around on an empirical basis. So our census is, last census was 2006, so we should have done it the next one 10 years, averagely 10 years, so we're 4 years behind. And so I listened to you say something about whether we will be over 200 million. You see, it depends on who is counting that knows our numbers. And without a census, we won't know it. And it is a very serious planning tool. I would love to have one like yesterday. But the point to make is that everybody, perhaps, or many people, have been adding up and compounding the census numbers since 2006, and perhaps just estimating and guesstimating by saying, okay, our growth rate is maybe 3% or something of that sort. But who is making deductions from the death rate? Because many people have also died, and that is how a society evolves. At some age, new ones come in. So those who guesstimate these numbers add the death rates and the migration rates, because those are part of the perhaps indicators that give you what the real figure is. And do they also account for those who have adopted Nigerian citizenship? Because again, citizenship is granted on a periodic basis. But that said, the number of 17 or whatever million that you're talking about, in my view, has no scientific basis. If we use science, from the last MBS statistics that I had, we had approximately 35 million households. So if your figure of 17 million is any use, and in my view it is not, it means that half of Nigeria is homeless. That is not the case. And evidence that is available before us suggests also that that is not the case. The shortage of housing problem is much more defined in urban centers, and that is the way it is in many other countries. It's a migration from rural to urban settings. There are empty houses in many urban and suburban areas. Even in the urban centers, there are empty, unoccupied, unused houses. So, and that now takes me to the problem. The problem is, how do we match what is available with the need? The best practice is that not everybody will be able to afford to own a house. But as much as possible, government must do its best to ensure that people have decent shelter. whether you rent or whether you own. And this is where we are playing. So we are playing by allocating land with site and service facilities for those who want their own land. We are playing by allocating estate development loan through the Federal Mortgage Bank that was reported in the opening part of your report. We're playing by also building through the Federal Housing Authority. But the picture of Nigeria's housing challenge or success cannot be measured by looking only at what the federal government is doing. It is the state governments that even actually control land and can do a lot more in terms of actual building. So we need to also see what is happening in the states, and I'm aware that there are very impressive stories coming out of the states, and we also, more importantly, need to see what is going on in the private sector. And on many platforms, including yours, we see many private housing developers now coming on stream, building to taste, building to pocket, building to budget. That is what tells the story of the Nigerian housing challenge. So everybody playing a role. But what we are now doing to increase scope and scale is the cooperative housing scheme that we launched early this year, where we're encouraging cooperatives to pull together, and then they are able to access funding from the Federal Mortgage Bank in all the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory if they own their land, if they have their own drawings, if they have designed their own house, so that we address the issue of affordability and use the power of cooperatives to do more.
I'm just wondering, still, excuse me, still on housing, I recall that some years ago you began floating the idea of seeking to boost the economics of construction and the standardization of housing components, such as doors, doorknobs, and all kinds of accessories that you will have in a house. That way, it's a lot easier to readily assemble and then deliver on mass housing. You also came up with some modeling format. What is the progress in that regard, and how has the industry keyed into that, if at all?
Okay, I will deal with that in two ways. First, I will go back to some of the reports that, excuse me, preceded my coming on, and I hear people talking about building 1 million houses. And the question, some of the questions I've always asked is, look, listen, how do you build 1 million houses in a very restricted time frame, maybe 1 year, 2 years? It's first to understand that, let us assume that each house will have one door. That would be 1 million doors. And you need to really quantify the size of 1 million doors. But as if that was not difficult enough, each door will require at least 2 hinges to install. That would be 2 million hinges. And let us assume that each hinge just had 2 nails. That would be 4 million nails. So just assume again that each house had only 1 window, which will not be the case. That would be 1 million windows. So which economy in the world makes 1 million windows in a year or 2 years? And what is the practicality of even getting the raw materials to do all of that? So let us assume again that each house will just have 10 tiles of 1 square meter each. That's 10 square meters. That's a very tiny house. That would be 10 million tiles. Just the capacity to produce and to lay and to install those tiles in a very restricted time frame clearly suggests that this is a difficult undertaking. And that's why I said we must look at the totality of what everybody, the states, the local governments, where possible, the federal government, and particularly the private sector are playing. So we want to ramp up mechanization of housing, but in a way that profits this economy. Some of the proposals we have seen are people exporting their own technology for modular construction to us. That is going to take our people out of work. And therefore, while we are dealing with the labor-intensive capacities that we have, so that bricklayers, welders, artisans continue to enjoy the opportunity of daily income we are working on designing the modular technology that will produce the houses at a quicker speed in the background. There are other private initiatives where they are converting existing facilities like containers into high-speed housing, and they're building house bungalows in 4 days. But we can't prescribe that for Nigerians, but we leave Nigerians to choose. So some people are buying that, but we think that we must work harder to prescribe something that is basic standard and that is consistent with what the Society of Engineers, the architects, and all of the stakeholders accept is the type of minimum standard of housing that protects you from wind, that protects you from water, and that protects you from harm.
All right, sir. More on the housing aspect. You talked about the role the subnational governments should play in this. And I want to ask, is there any synergy that exists between the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing and the state's counterpart? I ask this because the majority of Nigerians reside in the states. You are here in Abuja, and it's important to note that Nigerians believe that we have a federal system of government, and when it comes to housing, that you have to play a bigger role. Now, is there a synergy? Because if there's a synergy, perhaps whatever policy you have in the housing sector will trickle down to the ordinary Nigerians. Again, in the cities in Nigeria, we have so many slums in the cities, and in the big houses you talked about, where we have empty houses, especially in Abuja here, they are not affordable. What can be done about this?
Okay, in terms of synergy, the answer to your question is yes, there is synergy between federal and state governments, and I will give you examples. First of all, we have a controller for housing in every state of the country, as we have in the FCT, in the same vein that we have a controller for works in every state of the country, as we have in the FCT. Secondly, the National Housing Program that was featured in the earlier introductory part of your report, where we are building in 34 states, could not have happened if the states did not give us land. So 34 states have given us land. My state, Lagos, has now offered us land, which we are inspecting and testing the soil and everything before we move forward with it. So that synergy exists. The cooperative housing scheme that I just mentioned is based on our leveraging on the capacity of the states. As you rightly said, the people who need the houses are not in Abuja, and that's why we ask the cooperative in their states, go to your state, register your cooperative with your state government, register yourself and apply for land from your state governor. You must get a building permit from your state government so that we know that it is an approved place for an approved type of building, to avoid subsequent relocation or demolition on the grounds that it wasn't approved. So these are levels of partnership that we are having with the states, because there's very little we can do really in terms of housing, even in terms of road construction, without land. And under the present legislative arrangement, states control the land. So we do with land only what the states permit us to do. So all of that is going on. I'm sorry I missed the second leg of the question, if you can refresh my memory.
Yeah, the second part of it is that most of the houses that we have, let's take for instance in Abuja here, we have so many houses that are unoccupied.
Oh yes, now I remember. Thank you very much. Now I remember. You see, those are private houses, and they are protected by law, unless of course government for public purpose, overriding public purpose, acquires them. We cannot do that. So it is left for private citizens to also realize that an empty house is dead capital. And some of these houses are empty for different reasons. Either they are overbuilt and therefore too big and people can't afford them, in which case this may be the time to start putting debt capital back to work by remodeling them into smaller units that the very upwardly mobile young people now need. The generation of my own children are not looking to stay in 8-bedroom massive houses. They are very mobile. All they need is their Wi-Fi, little space, and therefore we must begin to build a model according to the needs of those who are now the capital mobilizers of Nigeria, young generation between 20 and 35. So we must, and I'm happy to say that some of this remodeling is already going on by very smart property owners, and I say very smart property owners, and I'm hoping that many more people will choose to be smart, who are remodeling their houses now. So a house built for only one person before has been remodeled, and therefore there was no tenant, has been remodeled to accommodate 3 different tenants. People are also remodeling their demand for rent. So if you're asking people who get a salary once a month in arrears to go and bring 2 years' salary in advance, where are they supposed to get it? Unless they do something perhaps extraordinary and maybe unlawful to get in advance what they earn in arrears. So when the necessity demands that we change things as is beginning to happen, people will say, okay, maybe instead of 2 years' rent, maybe I should take 1 quarter's rent, and that is perhaps more affordable. I like to see the day where people will pay their rent in arrears when they earn their salary. And I have advocated that this can be done, where the real fear is that the tenant may default. You may get his employer to domicile payment with you every month and do deduction as source by agreement, so that before he pays his employee's salary, he deducts your rent with the consent of the employee. So these are possibilities, and we are beginning to see remodeling and adaptation of houses to respond retroactively to what the market wants.
But still on housing, and considering the shortages that we do have, there is clear evidence of recourse to self-help. Not many persons are waiting for government housing projects to be delivered, whether at the federal or at the subnational levels. But what we have also seen over the years, even for the site and service schemes, is that, yes, people go out on their own, struggle to build their own houses, but there is no infrastructure. No roads, no water, no electricity, and then they struggle, and after a while, you just find that they're trying to get things done, and it never really adds up in terms of infrastructure. Are we likely to see, or are you likely to pursue a course so that, as we find in elsewhere, infrastructure is available even in areas where people are resorting to self-help?
Well, first of all, let us be clear again. As the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, our jurisdiction with regards to works like roads is interstate roads. So the last mile roads, the roads that connect cities, local governments, and that connect wards, are the responsibilities of states and local governments. Let's keep those waters pure and clean, because perhaps it is the lack of clarity about this rule. So once the federal government links FCT to Lokoja, the capital, the internal roads that take you from inside Lokoja to Dekina and all of its component parts is the responsibility of the state government, up to the point where the road that takes you from one ward to another ward becomes that of the local government. This is clearly the case in all the federations that I know. But in addition to that, the issue about access road and all of those things you talk about are also within the remit of town and urban planning. That has been clearly decided by the Supreme Court to be a state matter. So I was in the state level then when we challenged the power of the federal government to be issuing planning approval from Abuja. And the Supreme Court agreed that it was wrong. and declared the law that allowed or by which the federal government purported to do this to be unconstitutional. Now, let me be clear. Federal government also develop estates. And to the extent that we are the ones developing the estate, we provide the site and services within our own estate. And we do it subject to the approval of the municipal authority. And if you go back into some of your feed, you might recall, and you will find a video where I stopped work when the FCT stopped our contractor who had not applied for planning permit. And I told the contractor to stop whatever he was doing and go and comply. That is how it should be in a federation.
I was just wondering, Honourable Minister, I'm aware of this background that you have laid as to the compartments of the various authorities, federal and subnationals. But against the background that, of course, you have a National Council on Works and perhaps also a National Council on Housing, I believe that these are some of the issues that will come up from time to time. If subnational entities are struggling to deliver on housing and thereby reduce the housing deficit, the question of the frequent resort to self-help and then persons who have developed their properties, being left in the lurch, as it were, in terms of infrastructure. I wanted to just give a holistic picture, not that I was asking you to profile a solution as to what the federal government will do in terms of providing municipal roads.
Okay, this is what it is. We have this Council of State meeting, National Council meeting in works and in housing, as you appropriately highlight. And it is only but an example of the collaboration and synergy between the federal government and the states that I have earlier alluded to. All of these smaller issues are, of course, issues that are discussed at the council. And for the benefit of your viewers, is just to say that the Council on Housing, for example, is made up of the federal government and the 36 commissioners or appropriate officer in charge of housing for each state of the federation. So too the Minister for Works and the various officers or commissioners, as the case may be, representing each state in terms of public works. And we discuss problems, we peer review, we share knowledge, and also we plan development that involves collaborative work together. So, for example, this our National Cooperative Housing Project could not have taken place without first discussing it at the National Council on Housing. So we discussed it late last year at the council meeting, and it was approved, and states said they will participate. The National Housing Program that we started in 2016 had to first be discussed at the National Council on Housing before it could take place. So issues about slums are also, as you rightly acknowledged, being discussed there. But the final solution lies with what each state does within its own territory. As I speak to you, the Ministry of Works and Housing at national level is putting together a slum intervention program, but we cannot do it without collaboration with the states. This is now an initiative post-COVID that we're looking at how we can make life easier for people in those places. Some will just perhaps need a drainage, some will need a drainage and a road, some will need a remodeling of their water source, and so many things. So if you improve the quality of the infrastructure, as you rightly pointed out, these are things that also enrich people, move them away from poverty towards prosperity. So if you went to a slum, for example, where there was no road, you can imagine what happens to the rental income, where you build a road and there's drainage and there's health facility and all of that. The income of the landlord will clearly increase. And those are some of the people that the president has always said he wanted to reach and move out of poverty in a decade. So every time there is that infrastructure intervention, to upgrade a slum, to build a road. The quality of land there appreciates. People got more rental income, more credit value for their houses, and as I said on another program, just issuing title documents, issuing COVs, and we've done almost 4,000 now the last 2 years to people, and issuing consents to subsequent transactions are also many levels of interventions and contributions that is not visible to the public, but that is helping in the housing industry.
All right, Honorable Minister, thank you indeed for your explanations. But as we plan to round off our conversation with you, I'd like to take you on this. There is this perennial incompletion of roads and bridges projects in Nigeria, lasting for over 3 decades. Growing up, I've heard about such road projects as Second Niger Bridge, Lagos Ibadan Expressway, Kaduna Zaria Kano Expressway, East-West Road, Port Harcourt Enugu, Lokoja Abuja. You know, these are roads that have been under construction for several decades, and one wonders, when can they be completed? And I'm sure that you have started working on some of those roads, but I'd like you to also let Nigerians know how far those roads have gone in terms of completion, because we're believing that one day these roads should be completed.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to start, and this is a very, very useful question. I'm going to start from the Lagos Ota-Abeokuta road. That road has been in the news for a while, and people are wondering what's happening. It was awarded before we came, but it was not funded. We revived it. Of course, by the time we revived it, the contractor said, look, we can't do it on the rates of 2006. Price of cement, price of iron rod, exchange rates, everything has changed. So we approved new rates. The real problem now is that as you and I speak, in this year's budget, that road has 3.1 billion naira. But the contractor has 2.5 billion naira claims in terms of work already done that haven't been paid. So he's not enthusiastic to commit more resources. Because in order for him to commit more resources, as I told you earlier, he has to subcontract to people to supply him sand, cement, iron rod, diesel, laterite, gravel. So who is going to give him credit for that unless we pay him? So what we are doing now is to include it among the roads that will be funded by the Sukuk, and hopefully when the distribution is made, because the Sukuk has now been completed, you see that. Then let me speak to the roads that you speak to generally, and to say that it was perhaps easier to build roads in the 60s and 70s because of our governmental system. We did not have to form consensus with many people. It was a much smaller government, much smaller country, and many of the roads that you talk about were virgin roads at the time being built. Now we have to build through a road that is being driven through. So whether it is the Abuja Kano that we now talk about, whether it is the Lagos Ibadan that we talk about, or the Kano Maiduguri road that we talk about, people are driving through as we are constructing. The ideal thing in a construction site is to shut it down. But we can't afford to do that anymore. We have to divert traffic, and we have to do this. Now, if you also go back, at the time that we had resources, we didn't commit to these roads. In 2005, Nigeria took $12 billion out of this economy to go and pay creditors. These roads existed at the time, but it was not our priority to build home. It was our priority to pay foreign creditors first. I don't know which home does that. When your house is leaking, your roof is leaking, and you tell your family, first, let me go and pay the bank. So, but that was a decision we took. Then we started borrowing after taking that decision. So it was a misplacement of priority. And that is what this government has now inherited. In even more difficult circumstances, reduced revenues, growing population, and having to build during and through that logjam. What we're doing is really phenomenal in terms of what has now been achieved in 5 years with fewer resources and an increasing population. What we are doing, what the Buhari government is doing, is simply phenomenal in terms of infrastructure. And those who now again complain say, oh, don't borrow. So we lost 1 year simply because Parliament reduced all the budgets. 2017, and I was on many platforms complaining. But if you lose 1 year of construction, that's 1 year of delay. And that is 1 year further from completion. But the truth is that I have news, good news, that we planned to complete 22 major roads this year, between this year, 2020 and 2021, because clearly this is delivery time. And we've lost about 3 good months, dry months, due to COVID, but we remain hopeful that in spite of the revision in the completion calendar, we will deliver as many as our resources and time permit us to do.
I was just wondering, Honorable Minister, could you indicate some of the 22 major roads you intend to complete between now and next year? And also tell us, what is, in your opinion, your major trophy in the work sector?
Even if I was a computer, I would ask for memory upgrade.
Yeah, I know. I said some. I didn't say all.
But some of those roads. Look, I don't want to mess up my facts, and I need to go to my notes to identify specifically. But I believe some of the sections of the Kano Maiduguri are involved. Some of the sections of the Sokoto to Kotangora are involved. There are a couple of other routes down south in the north central that are nearing completion. The Abuja to Lokoja road is part of them. We were looking at the local Oweto. It's quite a, but I will err on the side of safety so that I don't raise people's expectations unduly.
Okay, I was just wondering, yeah, that's fine. I mean, that's it's okay, but I'm sure you know that. I mean, there are some roads people will be anxious to hear whether those roads are involved. Yeah. I mean, I'm saying Benin Warri Expressway, for instance, and then the Calabar, Oku-Iboku, and the Uyul highway that collapsed at some point.
No, the Calabar, Odupani, Oku-Iboku area is just starting. Those are some of the very, very difficult terrain we have to walk in, especially during the rainy season. Our plan was that we would have made a lot of progress in intervening in that road, Calabar, Udupani, Cham to Newman, those are the sections between Gumbe and Adamawa, the part between Auchi and Okene on the Abuja, on the Benin Lokoja road, the Lagos Ota road that I told you about. Those are very, very difficult areas. And Benin Warri road, those are very, very difficult areas to traverse for commuters during the rainy season. But it is what it is. We hope that with economy not yet running at full speed because of interstate restrictions, people will have a less difficult experience there this year. We had hoped that it would be better than this, but we couldn't work for 3 months, and our revenues also went south. But here we are. We remain optimistic that as soon as the rains subside now, and as soon as many more people are able to move around, work will resume in earnest. But it might be useful for Nigerians to know that even in spite of the COVID and the challenges of getting workers to work safely so that they don't fall ill, we have 11 major contractors back on our roadsides. We have them working across 26 states on 53 projects. We have some of our housing contractors also back, subject to health guidelines as advised by NCDC. And we are hoping also that FEMA will soon come back for more rigorous maintenance. We have a proposal to work on 92 different sites through FEMA, spanning 24 states. Again, these are subject to health and safety guidelines. And touch wood, we hope that things will ease off as we move on from now.
All right, Honorable Minister, you have even done well, you know, in letting Nigerians know the number of roads that you've been able to mention. That is interesting. But I want to ask you this. Of course, we have the Presidential Order 5, you know, which promotes local content. And I want to know whether that is being incorporated in your development structure with respect to making sure Nigerians are participating effectively in road construction. What is the situation with respect to local content initiative of Mr. President?
Oh yes, I can say very, very clearly that my ministry has the implementation of the local content order at the forefront of our implementation. I can tell you very, very confidently that not only do we enforce it, we also keep track. So on many construction sites, I can tell you that no less than 90% of the people working on those construction sites are Nigerians. We have the data of what is happening. We keep track also of the material. It's not just men, it's also materials that are being used, ensuring as much as possible that the materials being used are locally made, unless there are things that Nigeria cannot make. So that is why I was able to tell you about the value chain of what is happening from bitumen, which is imported, diesel, which is imported, but even to ensure that it is Nigerians who are involved in the supply until our refineries begin to work to optimize supply. Cement is local, iron rod is local, and there's so many other things. People may not be aware, and so when they say, oh, the road is taking time, most of what we're doing now is that many of the roads we're building have geotextile materials laid on them. Those geotextiles are to protect the road from water entering and destroying the foundation of the road. A sizable number of that we're ensuring is made in Nigeria. So we're trying to ensure that as much as possible, it's not just labor, but that the Nigerian economy is the full beneficiary of the opportunities that we create. In housing, I have told you why we have been reluctant to take foreign modular building technology. It is part of this local content in that. Why should I empower another nation's business with my own resources and disempower my own people? So I would rather use labor intensive until I can build my technology than use another man's technology to displace my own people from work.
Well, Honorable Minister, very briefly, because we're getting pressed now for time, what is the rationale for the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing to be involved in the repair of internal roads on campuses of federal universities?
Yeah.
The rationale is simple. They are federal government institutions and they fall within the public works remit of the Federal Ministry of Works.
Okay, Honorable Minister, we have a torrent of tweets here from Nigerians who are watching this program and who also making contributions to the program. But your last answer, quite understandable. Those institutions are federal government-owned institutions, and some persons have suggested in the past that such internal roads in the universities can as well be constructed by the civil engineering students of those institutions, because that's a way for them to even start practicing, construction of roads themselves. That has been an idea from someone whom I have interviewed in the past, saying, look, all those internal roads in campuses should be constructed by students who are studying civil engineering.
And in the meantime, TED Fund also intervenes in terms of infrastructure.
I don't disagree with that thinking, but the truth was that it hasn't been done. And it is affecting the quality of education. That's a simple reality.
Exactly, sir. Now to the tweets. This one's coming from Mike Anyakwo. This combined.
So if there's a complaint now that we're intervening and the students can do, then we'll stop.
All right. Okay, from Mike Anyakwa, this combined ministry is very vital in any economy, especially developing ones like ours. Now, while we can succinctly say that there are a lot of improvements on our road constructions and rehabilitations, the developments in the housing subsector is very amorphous in 5 years of this administration. We need aggressive developments in these sectors of the economy.
Now, Chris Simeon tweets, bravo, the Minister of Works has tried his best in this administration. We're expecting more work to be done, especially in the south, where there are more dilapidated roads. Federal Minister of Works and Housing should put in enough efforts into this.
All right, I have from wherever I think Nigerian. He says the president has done well. I feel the impact on Lagos Ibadan Express Road. Every time I'm on that road, I have also seen pictures of their efforts on Second Niger Bridge, Loko Iweto Bridge, Boni Bodo Road, and several others. They should keep the flag flying.
Law Alpha say, now so many roads hitherto abandoned by previous administrations have been touched or receiving due attention. This includes Second Niger Bridge, East-West Road, etc. But a lot more still needs to be done concerning housing. All
right, from Festus, Works and Housing is a star ministry under Babatunde Fashola, an action minister. Okay, failure of government for the last 20 years to invest in roads and housing presents massive opportunity for Buhari's administration, and the administration has focused relentlessly on these two critical sectors. Kudos.
Now, Mutana Farouk, I really commend this administration for embarking on the completion of projects initiated by previous administrations. My question is, the majority of the populace in Nigeria do not have decent houses, and there are many unoccupied houses, especially in Abuja. How do we bridge this lacuna? I think that the Honorable Minister has spoken extensively with regard to that aspect. Abdul also tweets, says, the houses the ministry is building look like that of... Now, this is important. Says Abdul, the houses the ministry is building look like those of refugees. The need to redesign and make them look more decent is imperative. They look so low and need to be built higher. Talking about the headroom.
Yeah. Now, Francis Obi says, yes, I have not seen much improvement from the first tenure. Example, Ajokuta, from the first gate of a state company to the bridge. Several regimes have abandoned that small stretch of road. Later, the Chinese tile company will reconstruct it with a loan.
All right, Pen Praise, Google, and Fairmet Paul, that's Ibrahim Shalian. Those are the other persons who have sent in their tweets. We'd like to thank you for being part of this conversation. And Honorable Minister of Works and Housing, Babatunde Fashola, learned senior advocate of Nigeria, we'd like to thank you for being part of it and for finding time. Of course, apparently you were not on that flight last weekend for the concert that took place at Jabi Lake Mall, even though the person intended to have done some fascination. Honorable Minister, I delight having you around on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, it's Good Morning. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the NTA. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we have other guests who will be discussing aspects of works and housing.
Yeah, we thank you for staying with us up to this moment on Good Morning Nigeria. And as we earlier informed you, we have two other guests who are going to make contributions with respect to the topic of the day. Now, we have from our MENA studio, the Professor Mustafa Zubair, Coordinator, Niger State Urban Support Program and former Director, Center for Human Settlements and Urban Development, Federal Ministry of Technology, MENA. It's a pleasure to have you, sir, on this program.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Here with us in the Abuja studio is Engineer Kashim Ali, former president of Nigerian Society of Engineers, and of course a Council for Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, Koren. We appreciate your being here, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so let's begin the conversation of this segment with Engineer Kashim Ali. Engineer Kashim Ali, of course, you've also had experience in the public sector. What do you read of the efforts in terms of working on roads and bridges and other support infrastructure in the 5 years of the Buhari administration? We just had a conversation with the minister, and I'm sure you listened attentively to what he was saying.
Thank you very much. One thing that alarmed me was the fact that they have 600 projects ongoing. How can one human being deal with those? And how can one agency really deal with those? And I think we have a problem with not applying history for decision making. We didn't start with rules. We had rules even before independence. And we had a pattern of managing them. Then there may have been fewer rules that time, but we had a system of managing them, such that even the lateral rules were passable. The colonial master was moving from cities to cities freely. After independence and subsequent after, when we took over, we were still doing, we had narrow single carriageway roads, and they were still passable. Somebody could get up at night and say he's traveling from Benin to Warri. You have no fear that your road, you have potholes that will take you out of the road and kill you. What was we were afraid of was your own ability to maneuver your course. So, but all these things change. They actually changed. The change was in the 80s, early 80s, just before the first term of Shagari was when this thing changed, unfortunately. What we used to do then, and I'm just taking a historical perspective, is that Federal Ministry used to be a coordinator, a policy maker, and monitor. Then they used to give resources to the state ministries of works. The state ministries of works were giving money, they were giving equipment, and the divisional officers were also giving equipment at the local government level. And your responsibility was to maintain rules, federal and state, within your own territory. And you were held accountable for it. So that ministry, therefore, would come around and monitor. And we monitor and send the stinker on your own component. You are in trouble. So when we finished that time, nobody was going to Federal Ministry to work. I recall when I was in the NYC camp, they came to recruit us to Federal Ministry. We said, we are not working there. Because there's no work in Federal Ministry. It's only for senior engineers that work. We were going to the state ministries. That is how it was. When they changed that pattern, everybody moved to the federal. And that federal became congested. But you stay in Lagos and managing Maiduguri. It was not working. Now in Abuja, you're managing Port Harcourt. It's not working either. It still not work. So we need to change the governance. How can one person manage 600 projects? Look at my Honorable Minister. I do know him. I have a lot of respect for him, right from his days as Lagos State government, and I've shown evidence of that as president of the Nigerian Society of Engineers. But see, he's looking older than he is because the pressure is on him. It shouldn't be that way. We need to do what other countries are doing to be successful. The governance as it is today is faulty, and it will not deliver roads. We have moved from that old ways of taking money to the federal state. We have moved now to having agencies, Federal Road Authority, Federal Road Funds, that will now sit down and take responsibility. So if you are running from here to Kano and have a problem on your road, and the accident, for instance, caused by the road, you can sue the agency. But today is the minister that is responsible for everything. So that is the major challenge. And because he has to stay and manage both macro and micro issues, some things escape his mind. For instance, let me give you one example. The way to local bridge, it started some years back. It was finished by this administration. But there's no benefit for that project today because there's no access road. If the access road had been done, by now people going to the southeast will take that route and take short journeys to the southeast. People are not, but I'm sure nobody has particularly drawn his attention to the urgency of that access road. To take it as maybe, let's say, as a quick win, to just do, and then create that impact in the economy. Nobody has done that. But if the system was decentralized, then somebody will be held directly responsible for that, and he will be doing it as his day job. So those are the issues. So I think enthusiasm is there, passion is there, love for country is there, but all those are not enough to bring about the result that we want.
All right, Kingsley, I'm sure that if you give a state Ministry of Works money to do any, they use that to run campaigns, and the way our value system is at the moment.
Well, that's why you have ICPC and EFCC.
All right,
are you with me? Clear?
Exactly.
No, because it's a very serious point that Engineer
has made. Yes,
Ale has raised.
Yes, let's bring in Professor Mustafa Zurbe, coordinator, Niger State Urban Support Program. So I've not been to Mina lately, but when I was in Mina, I was not particularly happy with the road, Abuja, Mina Road, and even internal roads in that city. But you are not going to speak of that now, but it's also part of our conversation. How do you assess the Buhari administration with respect to roads and housing in the last 5 years?
Very much. I want to focus attention more on the housing aspect of it. I'm sure you are aware that in 2012, the country developed a new housing and urban development policy. If you check that policy, especially Chapter 9, the institutional framework, the role assigned to the Federal Ministry, then Federal Ministry of Lands and Housing, now Federal Ministry of Works and Housing, is that of an enabler. The ministry has no business building houses, but the ministry has all the responsibility in this world in enabling the states, the local government, the private sector to get on with the business of building houses. The ministry today is in the market looking for building material just like the states, just like the private sector. The policy, unfortunately, up to today hasn't been, we have not started implementing it. And that's why this problem has become seemingly intractable. I mean, by being an enabler, essentially the state government, the federal government is supposed to be able to put before the states a variety of options in terms of building materials, in terms of standards, in terms of plot sizes, and so on. Of course, the federal government may not be able to impose anything on the state, but there are carrot and stick. And there must be plenty of information and knowledge the state can acquire and the local governments. That is not coming through. This National Council of Works and Housing, they call it, it's a 2 or 3 day meeting once in a year. See, you can't achieve much that way. But the truth is that federal government or federal ministry has offices in all the states. Controllers of housing works are all there. If the ministry is properly equipped and restructured to be an enabler, the controller will be there on the ground helping the states to address some of their problems. I think that's a basic misconception here. Quite frankly, from my little journey around the country, there's a pervasive lack of capacity. So housing actually can be, well, partly social, but then it can be a business. So I think that's part of the responsibility the ministry is supposed to begin to get people to appreciate the fact that you can build a lot of houses that are affordable and it can still be a business. The other issue that I'm very worried about is that we look at housing as distinct from urban development. In practical terms, the way we can solve housing problems is that we must see housing and urban development as two sides of the same coin. So a lot of the times now you go and see a lot of houses are being built in areas where there is no infrastructure or where they're able to do the roads but there's no water. Basically, we're adding brand new slums to the existing slum. So I think the issues are not being addressed the way they should be addressed. You know, for me, the policies are among the best policies. I've traveled quite a few places. People are hailing Nigeria as being able to produce very good policies. Sadly, we are still to begin proper implementation of the policy. And that starts by really restructuring the ministry and giving it, enabling it to play the role of an enabler, to help the states, to help the local government, to help the private sector, to begin to address some of the core issues in order to be able to do these houses. But if you leave it as it is now, people are just being left adrift. A lot of capacity is not there. Take the issue of land. I mean, by now we should begin to question how big a plot of land should we have in our urban areas. Unfortunately, the Land Use Act is still stuck in the Constitution. Now, by now we should now be able to extract it out of the Constitution to begin to amend it, to make land availability much faster and so on. So all these are very fundamental issues in my view, which if the ministry were playing the role expected of it as an enabler, it will be able to guide the states and provide them technical advice and put in place all kinds of, we talk a lot about partnership, PPP, all over the place. But I assure you, very many of these states don't even understand how it works in principle. So these are simple, but they look simple, but they're very important aspects that the state must be able to address holistically in order to be able to address, to provide mass housing that's affordable to its citizens. So for me, this is a major area of concern. So we've been bandying this talk about numbers. Well, in terms of housing deficit, for me, it's not as important as having a very effective and sustainable delivery system, with the federal government providing the support to the state government for them to get on with the business of providing houses. The minister mentioned quite a lot of innovative schemes, but it's not for the federal government to start them. It's the federal government to put in place these options for the state to understand how to implement them. Yes, cooperative housing is useful. Self-help housing, Kinsley mentioned that. These are all options, but to operationalize them, you need a bit of knowledge, you need a bit of skill, you need to find a way of carrying the people along. So these are, for me, important areas that we need to put in place, especially the role of the ministry, which we are yet to do. Unfortunately, we're in the process of, I think, amending the policy again without actually implementing it in the first place.
All right, Professor Zubair, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. We'll return to you presently. Engineer Kashim Ali, I wanted to go back to the historical dislocation that you referred to earlier, which you said occurred sometime in the Second Republic. But here we are. We have seen situations where state governments undertake the maintenance of federal roads. Oftentimes, reimbursement is a major issue. And recently, the Federal Executive Council decided that there will be no reimbursement if certain procedures are not followed. So state governments have been taking on federal roads, but it would appear that sometimes the quality of work without supervision is suspect. So how can we ensure that, look, if you actually ceded the maintenance of federal roads to state governments, that in fact they will do a terrific job? That's one. Secondly, if you look at the Federal Highways Act, I mean, all the federal roads are indicated there, where they are. Do we have too many roads that are labeled federal highways? Can't we, take these roads back to the jurisdiction of states? In other words, by an amendment of the Federal Highways Act?
As a matter of fact, let me take the first part.
Yes.
In fact, I told you, when I talk about the history, I said that was the system then, but it's no longer obtainable now, because the state governors that are even asking federal government to pay them reimbursement for what they have done on the federal road, you have to look at what they have done for themselves. Because I won't call any state, but I have a case of a state that was asking for refund one time, and I had cause to visit that state. And I saw even the state capital, the roads within the state capital were in such a terrible condition. And I was, where did he get money to work for federal government when he cannot even do the road within his own state capital? So I think that one is heavily politicized. I don't subscribe. I support the federal government totally for banning that. But what we are saying is we've moved from that stage. What we have now is structure. Roads are critical to economic development. As a matter of fact, there's an American president that said America did not have good roads because they had money, but they had money because they had good roads. I'm not quoting very directly, but you see, when you do have roads, a lot of transformation takes place in the economy. There are, like now in Abuja, you see at a point, people were bringing in goods into Abuja. Most of the goods we consume in Abuja are brought in. Foods that come from Nasarawa State are a bit cheaper than those that will come from anything from the east because of the road they pass through. But if the roads were good, assuming that the Soweto bridge was, the access road was done and people can move freely, you can bring all manners of things from the east, the cost of haulage will not be so high, so the cost of the goods will come down, and the economy can boom. So that system has failed. That old system is no longer, they have bastardized it and it's no longer working. What we need now, therefore, is moving forward, to have a structure where you have Federal Road Authority, that can go into legal arrangements. Because we say no money, there's always money for infrastructure. There are always, to each time you go for any country, they say, look, especially international country, they say there's money going around. And they're looking for people. But you have to have the right framework. If somebody wants to invest in our highways today in Nigeria, he won't do it. Because if you go into an agreement with the Federal Ministry of Works, tomorrow if the president does not want, he changes the name to Federal Ministry of Infrastructure, or even cleans it out. Who do you hold? So ministries are not bodies that you can do arrangements with, that some people can take to court easily. So, but if you have framework, like have Federal Road Authority, that is a creation of law, even if you disband it, there'll be a successor company. So that one can still be held accountable. Those ones can go into PPP. PPP has helped many countries, and PPP you can source money even from within. For Malaysia is a clear case. Malaysia used Petronas to fund most of these projects. In fact, the whole federal capital, Putrajaya, was built using resources from Petronas. But it was not like drawing money from Petronas to commit to the federal capital. Petronas, as an entity, gave loan to the organization that was responsible for the development of the federal capital to build. The only thing that they gave as free gift there is the mosque. Presidential palace is rented. So government pays back for the use of the presidential palace, for use of ministries and office building and everything. That is how it is done. There has to be that purposeful, that is where we need to be. Small countries, we started this project in 2000. Small countries like Ghana and Co that came to learn have adopted it, and it's working for them. So they are using that to improve the quality of their roadways. Many countries are doing that. So for us, we still continue to put our rules in the appropriation. And there's no way you can, 600, where would you ever, if you mop up all the money that from fuel, you can't complete these projects in 10 years. No matter their sizes, because there's no road project that is small. Even if it's small, they can't be less than 100 million, for instance. None of them can be less than 100 million in terms of size. So I think, where will you get that
kind of money?
This kind of money. So we have to, therefore, but the governance system now does not support that. And that's why I see the government running from helter to skelter. They must accept that you need to create. Why is it, even for instance, let me just ask this. Why is it that all other ministries have effective parastatals, except Federal Ministry of Works?
Okay, let's stop you there, sir, and go back to where we have Professor Mustafa Zubair. You listened to the Honorable Minister, in the area of housing development and what should be the role of a subnational government, in this country where we have a majority of Nigerians. So since you have considered housing as your major area of concern this morning, now you seem to be advocating a paradigm shift in housing in Nigeria and the way it is being pursued by government, both federal and state. Let us know what you're advocating for, what you would like the government to do differently to be able to have housing provided for Nigerians.
Like I said earlier, the role of federal government, in my view, and stated clearly in the policy, that is National Housing Policy 2012, is to create an enabling environment for the state and the local government and the private sector within to get on with the business of building houses. So really, that's where it is. That's where the people live. But the fundamental issue for me is that support, advice in terms of technology, how to organize public-private partnership, how to build modular structures, whether it should be labor-intensive or use a bit of technology or a hybrid, all kinds of issues like these are supposed to be looked into. And then options offered to the states. That's one story. There are a few states that I know are doing reasonably well. The role of the ministry, again, is to be able to compile information about this and then disseminate it to the states so that we can learn quite a lot. In fact, there's a requirement that the ministry, on an annual basis, to submit a national report on the state of housing in Nigeria. These are all the important issues that should be contained in it. But we at this point in time are still all out in the field building. I recall many years ago when I was the MD, Federal Housing Authority, the ministry supervised FHA when I was there. But the ministry was the biggest competitor of FHA. I remember this big, famous Gwarimpa housing estates. That is the Gwarimpa of FHA and Gwarimpa of the federal ministry behind. So the argument was that this is not a level playing field. If you supervise me, don't compete against me. If you want to compete against me, let's all go out and be competitors. So I think these are all, unfortunately, I don't know whether it's relics of the past or whatever it is. We need to bring housing development to the 21st century. The role of the ministry has to be substantially that of creating an enabling environment. I suspect that it will require rethink of the structure within the ministry itself and its offices at state level, so that it will be there to provide the technical support that states require on a real-time basis. I mean, there's a lot of funding all over the place for housing. So it's not a social service. There's this misconception in a few states you go to. The governors do this housing only when they can afford to do that. But they can be done effectively and affordably and as business. So people have to learn to do all this things. In my view, that is a central role of the federal government, especially the federal ministry itself.
Professor Zubey, let's take advantage of your earlier experience with the FHA. Why does it appear that other than perhaps Lagos and Abuja, elsewhere around the country, you hardly find FHA properties? Very briefly, why elsewhere in other state capitals, how many FHA structures are there, and why is it that there are so few?
A few of them, actually, I remember when I was there. But then part of the strategy there was to sell a lot of those houses as is, because I think they were becoming too unwieldy, too difficult. I know we did successful arrangement with some state government, Kano in particular, I remember, during the days of Kwankwaso. So there were a lot more houses when I was there, but we sold quite a few of them. Again, it's all part of what role actually FHA is supposed to be doing. You know, should FHA be building all over the place itself, or should it be partnering with the state government to bring to bear its expertise and its access to technology and so on to work with the state government? These are fundamental issues that should flow down, in my view, from the role of the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing as an enabler. So to a large extent, FHA is not, in my view, is not supposed to be building all over the place. It can facilitate. It can help the state government. It can partner with the state government. Because it has...
All right, Prof, we have to pause you as we are, of course, concluding this edition of Good Morning Nigeria on a very good note. So thank you for your contribution this morning, all the way from Minna, the capital of Niger State. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And back in our studio, we also like to appreciate Kashim Ali, former president of Nigerian Society of Engineers, and of course, a council for the regulation of engineering in Nigeria, current. It's also been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
All right, and it is here that we are ending this